Octopath Traveler. A lot of buzz, a lot of hype. You're an old school JRPG fan.
Yeah.
I have no idea what you think of this game. Octopath Traveler for the Switch, how is it? So far, because you're like 50 hours in, you haven't finished it.
This is something I should address right off the bat, is that it's Thursday, and the review embargo for this game is lifted. So there are people out there who have scored it and are talking about it. Our score is not up. Our review is not up. I still need to spend more time with the game. It's a big one.
Yeah.
So with that being said,
grain of salt.
That means that these are all like non-final impressions.
But after 50 hours, are you having a good time with it?
After about 50 hours, I am really enjoying this game.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, great.
Yeah. It's I like as someone who like really enjoyed playing like things like Chrono Trigger, things like Valkyrie Profile, things like Final Fantasy VI.
Yeah.
Like it's in a similar vein to some of those.
Oh boy.
In that like it's not exactly like any of those in any way, but it's almost like you hear this call from RPG fans sometimes that's like, hey, I just wish we could go back to like the 16-bit era. I want them to keep making like 16-bit real like full project RPGs.
Yeah. And not on mobile, Square. We know the game you're trying to play here.
Exactly.
Yeah. Interfaces that look good.
Yeah. Or things, and like, so I guess the thing, like the best way I can sell it from that perspective is it definitely like has aesthetic ties to that era.
Yeah.
The development partner on it is Acquire, and they're like, that's a studio that does like some good pixel art and stuff.
They also did like Tenchu back in the 90s and stuff. Like they're a weird old studio.
Yeah. But it manages to sort of harness that 16-bit look while still feeling new. It's not just like, oh, here's another top-down sprite-based RPG sort of thing.
Right. Yeah. What if there's a shallow depth of field and the contrast is way up and there's bloom lighting all over the place? What about that, fans?
And okay, you joke about that like that's some sort of like, hey, we're going to throw a bunch of like dumb visual tricks, but they work.
It works for you.
Like,
okay.
Like it's got a really it's just got a really cool. I really like the visual style.
Even just from playing the demo, that was sort of like a 3-hour demo that is supposed to lead into the full game.
Pretty generous,
basically.
Yeah.
That was like a very striking thing to go into, of just like, man, this looks different, but it still feels like it is both a retro aesthetic, but also like with all this bloom lighting and stuff.
Yeah.
So I want to dive in a little bit,
please.
Mechanics wise, I know, because there are people who will say like, this is nothing like Final Fantasy VI, nothing like Valkyrie Profile, nothing
just because
like
it looks vaguely like it,
right?
Yeah. So
there are certain elements of the game that like tie back and remind me, like in its best moments, it reminds me of just some of my favorite RPGs of that.
This sounds like very high praise.
Well, there's more coming later, but okay. I don't want to lead with the negative.
Please
here.
Don't.
So things like, one thing I love about it is that it's a turn-based battle system. That's normal, but it gives me some like Final Fantasy VI vibes in that like each character has just like unique abilities, things that only they can do.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of RPGs where it's just like everyone has the same command list, right? Everyone has fight, magic, item. But in this one,
it's the 6 to 7 for the Final Fantasy crowd debate,
But in this one, it's the idea that even though there's a job system and people can sort of like share some abilities, there are certain abilities that are just like that one character can do that other people can't. So it makes a difference who you have in your party. It sort of changes your approach to battle, and you need to shuffle who's in your party based on the circumstances and the story. And the story is partially what reminds me of the Valkyrie Profile angle too, because that's a game that's sort of told as you acquire party members. In that game, you sort of see the stories of their deaths told in like in a vignette, right?
Of their deaths?
Yeah. So in Valkyrie Profile, all of your party members are like souls that you're training for the afterlife. So so they've died, but their souls continue to battle on with you, right? So Octopath Traveler is a little like that, in that like anytime you like start a story chapter, it's focused on one character and one of the 8, Octopath, and
the name makes sense.
Yeah, I'm just saying. And And each one is, so far been maybe about an hour to an hour and a half or so of just these they're just like little story chunks that you play through, and then that little chapter is done.
So how are you triggering the next one? I don't understand that. I just played the demo, so I'm still confused about the larger structure here.
So basically, the whole structure is set up where you have eight total characters. You pick one to start with at the beginning. But the whole first chapter of the game is just going and doing all eight of the stories, and they're all the same no matter who you pick.
And then the end of each chapter is them Avengers-ing up, as they say.
No, not well. So that's actually one of my issues with the game, especially in that early chunk of it, is that the party members don't talk to each other. So there's no sense of them forming a team. So
there's no even inter-character dialogue of here's the hunter talking with the cleric.
Not in that first chunk of the game.
Weird.
As you go later on, you get these little an option to press a button and see a very short little what they call what I think travel banter or something, in which two characters have a brief exchange,
like a Tales thing. Okay.
But so think of it this way: is that you start the game with one character and you play through that whole intro section with just that character. All of the writing, all of the scenes are created as if for just that one person with you.
Yeah.
The scenes don't change after that as you acquire more party members. So it's every one of those 8 original stories is just focused on that one character. And you can bring other party members come with you into battle and stuff. But from a story perspective, it's basically they're not there.
That has me a little worried about just the overall tone of the story. Because even starting the demo, I got a quote here. The first line of the game is, "It had ill behooven me to leave without bidding my favorite prentice a fare thee well."
Yeah.
Did you choose the hunter?
I did.
Yeah, you obviously did. So that's it's so weird how it could start you off on the wrong foot, because I started with the thief.
Okay.
And then because of the way the world is laid out, is I sort of went clockwise around the world, and the next party member I encountered was the hunter, I think.
Okay.
And got to that dialogue in that village and was this sucks.
But that's not the entire game?
No.
Oh, thank God.
No, it's just that character, just in that village.
Okay. Holy God. Because I was flabbergasted. Because remember, Cyril, you had mentioned in a previous podcast, where I don't know, some of the Shakespearean stuff, it feels like it's a bit much at times. And I played this this is just waterboarding me with this Shakespearean text. This is way too much.
No, you didn't like the waterboarding?
That overblown stuff is very particular to that one, character. But that's not to say that everything else outside of that is sounds totally natural and great.
But the larger story, it works, because with this structure, I think it's tough to structure an impactful arc for all these characters, isn't it?
Well, yeah. So that's, I guess, again, getting to sort of what at this point in my playthrough is still kind of a, I guess I'm not really digging, is that all of the stories are separate. They've said, I read an interview or something where they said that the stories do sort of come together eventually.
Okay.
I'm not to the point where they do. So,
but it's not that they're separate. They're technically together, but still emotionally separate, is the weird distinction?
Yeah, I mean, the distinction is basically, it is 8 different stories that you just have the same cast, cast going through the dungeons and stuff.
Okay.
But each of the 8 characters, only one character participates essentially in each one of those steps along the way.
Okay. All right. But mechanically, it's juicy. It's Joe Juba JRPG, not so juicy.
Yes. So this, going back, is sort of kind of the combat is sort of where I am drawing that Persona reference from, because it's very focused on optimization, I guess, in the sense of okay, you want to weaken your enemy. You want to, I mean, it sounds like JRPG 101, but in this case, it's pretty necessary. The game is doesn't pull punches. This isn't some easy thing. If it says recommended level for this mission is 32, if you're much under that, it's gonna be a problem.
This ain't no Ni no Kuni 2. Did you think of Persona at all playing?
I actually thought most of Final Fantasy 13 actually, because of the way you have to sort of break your enemies. And then now you've broken through their shield by using the correct weapon. Now they're in this vulnerable state, and now this is when you do all your damage. So we explained before that basically you build up sort of extra turns or attacks basically, and you can sort of invest extra turns into one spell. Which I see the Persona reference, but the idea of like don't really hit them with everything you have until you've broken their shield with like the right weapon. But one thing I do like that it does is that it displays sort of instead of having to check or whatever like you do in Persona, it automatically displays like here's all of the things that you've hit it with that it's vulnerable to. But one of the concerns that I had going in is that even with one character, it feels like you have a lot of options. And so towards the end of my time with the demo, I fought a boss that was like kind of like really hard because it felt like I didn't have the right party members for it just because I didn't have the right access to it. But
what was the character?
It was Ophelia's boss that I fought with the Huntress and Ophelia. And so I think it needed like a sword or something, and I didn't have any swords in that party. Do you get into those situations a lot where it's like, well, I just don't. I'm not properly equipped for this because of the path I've chosen?
I think that you will run into times in that first, again, this is all just in that very early part of the game. In the first chapter, as you're acquiring the party members, there are times when like a boss will be weak to something that you don't have access to. But I don't think you'll ever run into a situation where you don't have access to anything that the boss is weak to. So it's like, yeah, maybe it's weak to sword, bow, and dark magic, and you only have a sword. Or maybe you just have the bow and the dark magic or something. So it's like there may be missing pieces of the puzzle, but I don't think there's a way that you can get into a situation where it's like, well, I don't have what I need to win this fight.
Right. Do you how intricate does the combat get? Because even just with 2 party members, it felt like I had a lot of things to choose from in terms of, do I want to save up my turns now or do I want to use this?
Yeah, you basically save up and like basically an extra attack will stockpile and then you can deplete that and use it whenever you want, and then it'll take a little pause. So should you just save those for the end of the battle? Like
no, so it's an interesting push and pull. That again, like this is part of what I really like about this game is when you get into the combat, how you use those points is situation dependent. So like if you have a fighter and you're going up against like a big tough enemy, you probably are smart to hold off until it's broken to do that. But there are also times when it's like, because each hit that you land with something that a boss is weak to or any enemy is weak to, it sort of depletes their resistance by 1, right? So you will run into situations where, like, let's say there's a boss that you have to hit 11 times before you break it. Well, you don't want to just do that one at a time. That's going to take forever. The boss is going to get more turns, going to inflict more damage. So maybe you spend some of those points to just like land 4 attacks at once. Even though you're not doing the damage that you want to do, you're at least
opening them up,
knocking down that number and like opening them up for later. Or there are also things that like how you spend those points. It's not always just like getting another attack. It's things like, okay, this enemy, if I just use my normal like physical defense down ability on it, it'll only be weak for 2 turns. But if I buff that with some of those points, suddenly it's like weak for 6 turns. But then that character also has a passive ability that increases all status effects by 1. So really it's weaker for 7 turns. So it's things like that determines how you spend those points. And that also gets into the idea that after that first chapter, you also start acquiring secondary jobs.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
So you can mix and match them?
Yeah. So basically you get all 8 of the jobs to just assign, like every character can have 1 extra job and each job can only be assigned to 1 character at a time. So
are they all as interesting as the Hunter? Because I really love that bee stuff. I love just the Pokemon aspect of being able to capture these weirdos and use their moves, bring them out. Even like using them around the town is so cool. Like a little provoke thing just to fight anybody you want with these beasts.
Yeah, the Hunter's pretty... the Hunter feels unique. I mean, they all have interesting twists to them. Some are more interesting and useful than others, though. Like, I don't really like the Apothecary. He's got this like... It's this mixed element of like, hey, I'm going to mix some items and something random will happen and we'll see what, once you do it, then you know what it does, but it's a lot of trial and error that I don't like
guesswork.
Burning turns on.
Yeah. And Cyril, you were the dancer, is that right?
No, I was the Hunter and then the cleric.
The cleric,
Ophelia.
Okay.
But one of the things I like is that like even like in combat, it feels like you have different options for like this character has a barrage of arrows that'll randomly hit targets, which is better on a target that has multiple, like shield health basically once you clear everything else out. So that adds like another element of like this particular thing I want to use on this character. But the party members seemed like both of them seemed like interesting, but I definitely felt like the Huntress's was the most sort of game changing, much more than like the cleric.
Okay.
Yeah, well, and the characters have different abilities. Like some of them are a little samey, right? So like the cleric and who's the other one? You can basically you can recruit people to come and fight with you, the dancer. Mm-hmm. So then you can sort of like summon them to come help you in battle. But that's a very like similar. They're kind of two sides of the same coin. Like it's essentially the same ability of just like recruiting a townsperson to come and follow you along.
Okay.
Or similarly, like. This isn't a battle ability, but like there's a merchant and a thief, and both of them can get items from townspeople. But the thief, you just steal them and get them for free, and the merchant, you have to buy them.
Boy, one sounds like a real hoot.
Yeah. Well, so
you have a reputation in the town, though, don't you?
Yeah, interesting. Okay.
They balance this by if you steal items, they have a percentage chance, right? So, I only have a 50% chance to steal this item, and you get like 5 failures before you have to like basically pay to restore your reputations in the town.
Okay.
But it's also totally like you can save scum it. Like
right.
I got a weapon that I don't know, I was probably like 15 to 20 hours in the game and stole a weapon that had like a 3% chance to get that is still the best axe that I have encountered in the game.
Awesome.
So it's like
that's good JRPG.
And so like ultimately it makes buying things makes me feel like a sucker or something.
Yeah,
just like in real life.
But unless you don't, you also don't want to spend. I got that weapon sort of on a fluke, like really, like just a couple reloads. But theoretically, you could just sit there and like bang your head against that for 20 minutes, hoping that the random chance would give you the item you want.
Right. So at 50 hours, now you still have a lot to go. Does it feel like it's sustaining that length? Is there enough meat in them bones?
Well, so that's
he's looking at me, shaking his head.
So I like I was saying, like I enjoy the combat, and in its best moments, it sort of reminds me of these old games in very good ways. It also brings forward some grindy stuff that doesn't totally make sense to me. Because it's like it basically, the story, the flow of the game is about doing 8 chapters of a story. Like, so 8 individual chapters, and then the next wave of 8, and then the next wave of 8. And between those waves, I've hit this thing where it's like, well, recommended level for this is 40, and it's like, well, that character is level 30 right now, so I guess I just have to go grind.
Not the end of the world?
Well, it's not the end of the world, but it also is like, this game is not super generous in terms of how quickly you gain levels.
Okay.
So the grinding part, and again, that's a part of like old school JRPG design that was totally fine back then. But I don't see a reason for that to like still be around, right? Like just sitting there fighting monsters and grinding experience for hours so you can proceed with like what the game actually does. Like that feels like bloat to me.
Yeah.
Like, so I've run into that. The only explanation I can think of is that like the game has a fast travel option, which I use all the time.
Ah, there it is. Okay.
So it's not like I'm running away from encounters, but if I'm on one half of, like on one side of the world, I'm not going to spend an hour like just walking to the other side of the world.
But maybe they balanced it.
Fighting everything. Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe they expected that, added fast travel later. I don't know. But so to me, it's weird that the story, when the thing that's supposed to be pulling you along is like these individual stories and seeing how they unfold and intertwine. And if that's the draw, it seems weird that at the end of one wave of stories that they don't make sure that you're ready to like keep going with that there's just this like
artificial time, like sort of gating that seems off.
Yeah. Music seems good.
Yeah, music's good.
Also, it feels like a really good game to play handheld. Have you been playing a lot of handheld?
I've probably done about half and half with it.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean it's I haven't noticed any sort of like degradation in handheld mode.
It's full 3D if you're playing your TV, but it's this weird 2D thing if you're playing.
Wait for the Digital Foundry analysis.
Well, no, but I mean, like on a game like Xenoblade Chronicles 2, it was looked noticeably worse.
Oh, really?
In if you were playing undocked.
Oh, okay. So, are you enjoying this game more than your time with Xenoblade Chronicles 2?
Oh yeah.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
Good game. You're ready to say?
Oh yeah. It's a good game, and assuming it doesn't fall apart in the sort of later chunks, like I would definitely recommend it to anyone who's sort of likes the games that we've mentioned here, is just is a fan of JRPGs in general. Like it's but it's long. Be ready for that too.
That was just a clip from a larger show called The Game Informer Show. You can find it on iTunes, Google Play, or GameInformer.com. We take the fun opportunities and exclusive information from Game Informer magazine and boil it into a show that airs every Thursday with exclusive cover story information, developer interviews, a lot of fun stuff. So come love games with us.